My name is Manjeet Kaur.
My name is Gurnam Singh.
Welcome to the One Show. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
A very big welcome to all the Akal channel viewers across the world. बहुत स्वागत है दर्शकों का। जिस तरह ਅਸੀਂ ਪਿਛਲੇ ਹਫਤੇ ਇੱਕ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਕੀਤਾ ਸੀ ਜਿਸ ਨੂੰ ਆਪਾਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਸੀ SWOT ਐਨਾਲਿਸਿਸ ਤੇ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਸੀਂ ਇੱਕ ਮੈਨੇਜਮੈਂਟ ਟੂਲ ਹੈਗਾ ਜਿਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਸਿੱਖੀ ਦੇ ਭਵਿੱਖ ਬਾਰੇ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਦੇ ਭਵਿੱਖ ਬਾਰੇ the future of Sikhs, that's what the program was last week, Manjeet.
It was, yeah.
And so, you know, we raised a lot of issues and we're going to take that theme now for this week as well. And, you know, we've got some very big issues, haven't we?
Yes, definitely we have today, yeah.
And I think because we've got big issues, we've got some big guns now this week to address those issues as well.
ਜਾਨੀ ਪਛਾਣ ਸਾਡੇ ਗੈਸਟ ਅੱਜ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਮਨਾਂ 'ਚ ਕੋਈ ਮਨਾਂ 'ਚ ਵਿਚਾਰ ਹੋਗੇ ਸ਼ਾਇਦ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਅੱਜ ਜਵਾਬ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਮਿਲ ਜੂਗੇ
ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਜਵਾਬ ਮਿਲਣਗੇ ਜੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਤਾਂ ਸਾਡੇ ਛਿੱਤਰ ਪੈਣੇ ਆ ਪਰ anyway a ਬਹੁਤ serious issue ਆ ਅੱਜ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ if we look at the research it seems like ਉਹਦਾ ਤਾਂ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਜਦੋਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰੇ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਮਨਜੀਤ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਮਹਿਸੂਸ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਵੀ ਬਹੁਤ ਸਿੱਖੀ ਵਧੀ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਆ ਜਾਂ ਬਹੁਤ ਸਿੱਖ ਪਰ ਅਸਲ ਵਿੱਚ ਉਹ ਦਾਇਰੇ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ we're part of what you might call a sample.
Yeah.
But ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵਿਸ਼ਾਲ if you look at the wider picture actually you know the vast majority and we have an academic here today who might be able to verify
definitely
the vast majority of young Sikhs are pretty much alienated from the gurdwaras.
Definitely are, yeah.
Definitely are. And so that's going to be one of the questions that we're going to be asking is how can we engage the wider kind of population of young Sikhs? How can we not lose a generation? So that's the first part. The second part of the today's show, we're going to be widening the discussion to Sikh institutions and, you know, how can we evolve and develop both evolve our existing Sikh institutions, the Gurdwara is obviously the key one, but also develop new institutions. And actually what we have now is the emergence of new forms of prachar and new ways in which Sikhs are actually engaging with not only Sikhs but with the public as well. So we'll be looking at that. And then the third one really is the big question is about the Sikh struggle. You know, it's 30 odd years and just recently there have been some very important developments. For example, the Banji Singh Pamma case, which was a phenomenal victory for Sikhs. And I think it was not only a victory for Sikhs, it was also a lesson that we learnt.
Definitely
in fact, when we did all the shows, after that, these were the key questions. What lessons did we learn? And I think the key lesson was around we need to organise politically, we need to be very strategic, and we need to use all those skills that you need. And so we're going to be exploring that. What implications does that have for our struggle, our freedom struggle in India? And also in the context of the rise of the RSS and some of the events that are happening in JNU where you know, we have now Dalit students and others openly, as it were, standing up against what you might say is the same ideology that the Sikhs are also struggling in. So this is, you know, we've got a lot of issues today. And we managed to squeeze another 10 minutes out of the channel. So we will be going until about 9:10. And towards the end of the programme, maybe towards kind of 8:30, 8:45, we will also open up the lines and give the viewers around 15 minutes. So if you
we'll give you the opportunity, so please call in.
Absolutely, but not now. We're going to listen. You're going to listen to the contributions of our experts here. And then later on we'll give you a chance and if you're wanting to contribute. So I think we should
we start and introduce our guest?
Absolutely. Jimmy, I'll start from my right hand side. On my immediate right, my meri choti pen, Dr. Apinderjeet Kaur. Apinderjeet is head of religious studies at University of Wolverhampton, but Apinderjeet's PhD research and much of her writing has also been involved in researching young Sikhs and Sikh institutions and Sikh organisations. And next to Apinderjeet is by Jagraj Singh Ji from Basics of Sikhi. Again, he doesn't need an introduction, but just for the record, Bhai Sahib was in the British Army and he's an Oxford University graduate in politics, economics and philosophy, and he's putting that to good use. So if I go to my left, my immediate left, another, I would say, rising star amongst the Sikhs is Jaz Singh. Jaz, you will know, was very active in the Sikh manifesto at the last election and was able to mobilise, I think, a massive, you know, kind of campaign and publicity. Jaz, as I say, Sikh Network, and is also a management consultant. And next to Jaz, we have by Shamsher Singh Ji, who is from the National Sikh Youth Federation. Again, I think what really I like about people like Shamsher Singh is that it's a new generation of Sikhs who are taking all kinds of interesting ideas, post-colonial liberation ideas, and bringing those into the kind of understanding the Sikh condition. So, ek wari, I think, sare nu fateh bulaiye and we'll get on with the show. Waheguru
Ji ka Khalsa,
Waheguru Ji ki
Waheguru Ji ki
Fateh.
Fateh. Jamshed, I have a straightforward question. Are we losing our next generation?
To be honest, I don't think so. I think the alienation issue is something that firstly, we don't have the data for it. I think Dr. Pinjit can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was Dr. Jagjit Singh in his doctoral research that studied the interaction between the Sikh community, especially the youngsters, and the Gurdwara, and he actually found his results were quite positive. Young Sikhs were engaged with the Gurdwara, they were engaged with going to the Gurdwara simply for that they get the peace of mind from the Gurdwara, and they found it to be a safe place. And if we look from where I'm
his
from,
sample was a
Southall,
very purposive sample. It was a very self-selecting sample, so you could argue that it was only confined to those that were already engaged.
but that's the only data we have. So I mean, the statement, we can make the statement, but we don't actually have the data to back it up unless you can produce something.
Well, I'll give you some anecdotal. I mean, you're right, we haven't got the research, and Pinderji might want to come in. But if you go to, say, a wedding, a Punjabi wedding, you look actually nearly, it's a sea of clean-shaven, nobody without turbans. The people that we see with turbans tend to be in the samagams, in the, the Panthak programs. So, maybe we do need to get more concrete evidence.
But on that point, I would agree with you. There is Sikhi is changing, and it's changing because of the reasons of coloniality and the experience of living here in the West, and they call it multiculturalism, but I would call it assimilation, that we're adopting a Western lifestyle, we're adopting a Western dress, we're adopting all of these alien values, and it's changing our perception of ourselves. And this happened because of the violence of the colonial encounter, and that fundamentally altered our relationship with ourself, our sense of self, our geographical homeland, everything about being a Sikh changed from with the violence of that encounter.
I mean, this concept of alienation, yeah?
Yeah.
Because obviously you've taken the work from people like Frantz Fanon and post-colonial writers who were talking about the experience of black and African Americans as well. So you think that those theories of the alienation of the black people can be applied also to our, and how far back does that go? Does it go to pre-partition Punjab, post-partition Punjab? Is it the last 30 years? When did this alienation begin?
I think if we look at the moment the British arrived, the Portuguese arrived in India, and the violence with which they began to subjugate, systematically erode the cultural foundations of the people that they encountered under the guise of discovery, which was essentially exploitation. I think we can trace it back to the beginning of the 18th century.
So is the glorious history of Sikhs in the British Indian Army also a manifestation of alienation? Because we celebrate those aspects of our history.
We do today. At the time we didn't, and we know from the works of Chandan, he's written about this, he's written poetry about this, he's written papers about this, Amarjit Singh Chandan, and he talks about at the time when the Sikhs were joining the British Army, the British began a propaganda campaign. They began releasing songs to enliven the people of Punjab and push this image of the martial race and their involvement within the British Army. But the people of Punjab responded by writing their own songs and saying that, "Oh Jawan, you may be joining the army and you may die a glorious death, but our Qawm will never recognize you as a shaheed."
A lot of the Gadar literature.
A lot of the
also
Gadar
picks that,
literature. So at the time, the Sikh Qawm on a Panthik level didn't accept the involvement of the Sikhs within the British Army. And the British were very clever in the way that they pushed their agenda of assimilating and leveraging their understanding of Sikhi so that it would benefit them. And today we celebrate that colonial exploitation.
So following the logic of your argument then, it would follow then, if we're going to do prachar amongst the Sikh youth, then we have to address this question of alienation and put it in the context of the history of colonialism.
We have to address the very idea of being Sikh in the West. The very idea of what it means to be Sikh. We're here and we're having these conversations, and we're having these conversations in English, and we're gaining citizenship, but what are we losing in the process? For us to have this space where we have these conversations and we talk about modernity, we're sitting on a foundation of genocide, of cultural appropriation. Day in, day out, we see our culture, our body, our image being attacked and exploited.
Okay, given that you've offered quite kind of academic arguments there, if I can just bring you, I'm going to throw it over to you. I mean, is Shamsher talking rubbish, or is there some kind of truth in his analysis? I mean, is it really that bad?
To be honest with you, this challenge of a decline in the numbers of youth is something that all faith communities are facing at the moment. It's not something
Not least
that's...
the Christians. They've got catastrophe, haven't they?
They've got a huge catastrophe, and which is why they've got employed individuals to actually be able to resolve these kinds of issues. They've got programs such as the Alpha program, etc. And in terms of alienation, yes, young Sikhs are engaging with Sikhi, but not traditionally in the Gurdwara anymore. And I would say especially non-Amritdhari Sikhs as well, who feel rather alienated from Smagam, say for example, where there is this kind of expectation that only Amritdhari youngsters will go along to such events. So for these youngsters, they are engaging with Sikhi, but by other means. This could be online, this could be through youth groups, etc. But their emphasis is on critical discourse, something that's encouraged throughout Sikhi. You know, rationality, discourse is something that Guru Nanak emphasises again and again. However, in the Gurdwara, there aren't the facilities for them to be able to have those kinds of discourses. Maybe because of language barriers. Maybe the Gyanis, for example, are not so proficient in speaking English. They haven't had the critical training. Maybe.
Do you think that would also address Shamsher's point that, in a sense, we're not quite sure what is the Sikhi that we're supposed to be following, given the kind of colonial kind of appropriations that you talk about. So, but the critical approach would allow them to have those tools to be able to discover for themselves.
They need to be having dialogues around who is a Sikh. We need to be having these dialogues around Sikh identity, because at the moment it's painted as being very black and white, where actually it's the grey areas that are causing the alienation of the youth. You know, it's not as straightforward as a Sikh is ABC. There is a lot more to it. And it's this kind of diversity which we actually have to recognise if we want to keep the next generation engaged.
And maybe Jagraj can pick up on that. I mean, because you're, in a sense, on that encounter, you are going out there and talking to young Sikhs. Do you detect some of these patterns of alienation?
Well, there's definitely alienation of the current youth from the political process, you know, of the Gurdwaras. They don't quite understand how it works. They definitely don't understand how India works and how the Punjab political system works. So most of them can't explain to you the SGPC, how it came into power. What we're dealing with is a lack of education as well. So it's possible to have a discussion about how the Sikhs were exploited by the British and then made to believe something other than what they were. But they don't know about their history. All they know is like snippets from what they heard here, what they heard there. Everybody knows it was good to beat the Nazis. So it feels good that you were on that side. So it's hard then to say, well, actually, you were exploited to fight against the Nazis. Actually, you would. So you see what I mean? So it's like somebody sitting here is going to take pride in the fact that somebody who had a pug and the star and who was a Sikh was over here fighting against the Nazis. If you say that, oh, you can't have that pride, I'll take that away from you, they're going to say, why? I feel proud of that. But at the same time, you have to understand that actually the people that signed up for fighting against the British, they were often doing that because the British had promised them, hey, you join us, then you can have a free India.
Jagraj, so what action should we take?
I think education. You don't have to sit there and
So
say,
it goes back to
you
education.
guys can't understand the world because you're unable to, because you're in a different country, different language. The best way is to educate them and treat them like intelligent people that
But
can
education isn't a neutral thing. I mean, you can. I mean, in a sense, the British. This is.
No, agreed. You have to.
They've been. I mean, the RSS are educating the people. So it has to be back to Pindaji's point. You have to give them critical. I mean, the basics of Sikhi. When you're. I mean, that's what you do on this in the pub. You engage in critical dialogue with those people, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we take a view, but we also encourage people to research. So it's not the case that we say this is our view, but yeah, we do.
You don't offer an orthodox. You don't say you either follow this or you offer an engagement, don't you?
When it comes to Sikhi, for example, the question you had about who is a Sikh, so obviously that's a big debate. I think in our Gurdwara, they allow us to sample Sikhi to a certain extent, but not to actually have a proper debate like Apinjit is saying. So you can't really have anything which is a bit touchy, a bit taboo. We can't talk about this.
Why is it
so what happens is you get a very basic. Yeah, we lack confidence and we lack the ability to actually have a discussion without having arguments. It's like we, for the last 3 years now, in Southall, हर एक संडे ਨੂੰ ਉੱਥੇ ਕਥਾ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈਗੀ 6 ਤੋਂ ਲੈ ਕੇ 7 ਵਜੇ ਤੱਕ तो उस तो उपरांत ਆਪਾਂ ਉੱਪਰ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਬੈਠ ਕੇ ਨਾ ਵਿਚਾਰ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ for about an hour and a half And the people that come are of very different backgrounds. You might get someone who's very against Khalistan. You might get somebody who's very pro-Khalistan. You might get somebody who is very much like anybody can be a Sikh and we can do whatever we want. Somebody else might say, "Nahi maryada hai, yahi karna hai." And the thing is there, or basically myself, because I conduct them, I control it so that people get a chance to speak. So it's a safe environment. But unfortunately, that's something that's very unique in this country. There's not many places you get to have a discussion. Going back to your point about like critical thinking, you won't develop critical thinking unless you actually face up against other people, but you also have to have Gurbani. So a lot of debates nowadays are not guided by Gurbani. So what we try and do is kind of throw in Gurbani, jive hon Panji ne kiha ki who is a Sikh. So there's many shabas that talk about who is a Sikh, but there's also shabas that on the face of them can be arguing different things. So you need to be able to kind of see that in the context. Ehi cheez nahi, you just take one shabad and run with that and say, "Hor kuch nahi ho sakta." There's many shabas that give a different angle on the same perspective, a different perspective on the same topic. So you have to have a wide-ranging knowledge of Gurbani.
That's brilliant.
So yes, it's required.
So Pinderji, is it going back, Jagras said, is it going back to education? Do you agree with that? Or is it to have a wider range of thinking? Or
I think it needs to go back to this issue of training. A lot of faith communities at the moment, for example, have trained individuals within their religious establishments. Those who are able, or those who should be having these discussions in the Gurdwara, don't necessarily have that training. Yes, they may be able to they may be able to read Gurmukhi, but are they able to explain that through a seminar?
but you're saying about, like, do you think that they should be born and bred? Then the Pracharaks?
Is that another issue?
We should have
From
some
this
training
country?
centres here in the UK. So, for example, where the Pracharaks, for example, Gyanis, others who conduct services should have a centre where they can actually go and train. In Wolverhampton, for example, we had some funding a few years ago through the Faith Encounters programme, which was funded by the Near Neighbours. And through that, individuals within the Wolverhampton context were trained, and at the end of it, they were given faith guiding awards. And through that, a number of individuals...
No, you're right,
at
because
the
you know
Gurdwara-
when... sorry to interrupt,
Yeah.
you're right, because when they come from India, they're very qualified and they're very fluent with the India English.
Punjabi, yeah.
The English as well.
Well,
and
Indian
the
English.
Indian English. But when they come here, the youth born and bred in this country, they don't understand them.
Absolutely.
So you're right on that point, what
Yeah.
you
Well, let
said.
me-
This is the issue, though.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
even putting up projectors in English, like, for example, a translation from Sikhi to the Max, say, for example, it uses literal translation. So, for example, when it talks about, say, for example, crossing the ocean of bliss, yes, fair enough. But the youngsters sitting there, do they really know what ocean they are crossing? And this is where the
Let me
training
take
comes
that,
in.
because innocent Jazz, if I can bring you in as well, and in the context of the prevent agenda, and you'll know about the prevent agenda, one of the policies of the government for the Muslims is that they're insisting on them having tests on their what they call them, their mullahs, that they should be able to be fluent in English, and preferably that they should actually be born. And this is the same idea that there's a kind of different mindset from over there. Do we need to have our own? In slightly challenges Shamsher's point. Do we need to grow our own mindset, a uniquely British-centred mindset?
I think we have a tendency to reinvent the wheel, and I think it's far too easy for people to reinvent Sikhi as well. In that we will find parts of Sikhi that fit our lifestyles, and too often that we're not prepared to actually follow what Gurbani says and what the Sikhi in terms of the path and our history is about. We'll take bits that suit our lifestyle, whether that's here in the West, whether that's even in Punjab these days. I think the key thing really comes down to what Pinderji and Jagras is actually the facilitation of the conversations. I mean, whether they're in the Gurdwara, whether they're on these channels, my view is that we lack the quality facilitators, because there is people out there with ideas, there's people out there with opinions. And when we did the manifesto, as you said, a year ago, we were surprised with the level of not only knowledge, but opinions and ideas and things that were impacting general people. So people who hadn't gone to a Gurdwara. So we took it out, and because they go out of Gurdwaras, but we did it in universities, we did it in community centres. The people are out
Why
there.
do they have a phobia then? Why do so many educated Sikhs, Punjabis have a phobia to get involved in these? Is it because they actually have a a incorrect view of existing Sikh organisation, or they actually have a correct view, which is don't mess with these people.
I think if you look at the Gurdwara managements in this day and age, how many of them are qualified enough to have not only understand Sikhi and be relevant to all of your Sangat, not just a section of your Sangat, and be able to attract new Sangat members. And I think this is where your original questions on Pracharaks, whether they're homegrown or from Punjab, it's got to be about what is the objectives. Who are we trying to attract and bring into Sikhi? What methods are we utilising? How are we keeping the Gurdwara as a community centre, not just a place where you hold your religious occasions and festivals, but actually you go there to learn. And we're in Birmingham. Smethwick is a great example. You've got community facilities, whether they're nurseries, whether they're other. The Gurdwara has to serve the whole community, not just a section of it. And the management has to be reflective of that.
If I can just come back to Shamshed, you know, there's what we call in education a pedagogical issue here. So there's an issue about pedagogy, the method in which we might teach. There's an issue about the curriculum, and it seems what you're saying, that we have to decolonize the Sikh mind. So how do we do that? What methodologies do we use?
Completely. There's a lot of work that's been done on coloniality that we, as a community, we haven't really accessed because we're too close to white privilege and too close to the establishment of this country and the government of here and being legitimate. And it's quite disheartening from the debate almost that the qualifying factor for explaining Sikhi is the ability to speak English, the ability to be born in the West, and we denigrate the ones that are we denigrate our own culture.
But
and
there's an irony. But you are actually making your argument using the very thing that you want to critique or
and it hurts my
decolonize.
heart so much, and I cannot explain to you the pain of existing as a Sikh in this
ਜਦ
country.
ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਚ ਗੱਲ ਕਰੀਏ
ਕਰਨੀ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ ਹੈ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਜੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਅਸਲੀਅਤ ਦੇਖੀਏ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਸ ਦੇਸ਼ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਦੀ ਹੋਣਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੀਗਾ ਜੇ ਗੋਰਿਆਂ ਨੇ ਆਣ ਕੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਦੇਸ਼ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਲੁੱਟ ਨਹੀਂ ਮਚਾਈ because of the violence of the colonial encounter we would never have been here and we're here because of that incident. Otherwise there would have been no Sikh diaspora because we would have been prospering in Punjab as we were before that encounter. And I think that the quality, and it's is very disheartening that the qualifying factor that we're saying to promote Sikhi, we're using academia, which is inherently racist, which promotes the colonial agenda. And you guys know this better than me. You can't talk about what it means to be a Sikh. You can't talk about the explicitly Sikh narrative from a Sikh space. I mean, even the interpreters of Sikh thought are white people. We can't even go to brown people and say...
But are you just pushing us into a corner where we can't escape?
We've been pushed into that corner and we've been beat into that corner, and now what they've taken out of that corner is somebody who doesn't know what Sikhi is.
Jagraj Singh ji, we're in the corner, they're beating us in the corner, and we've got to escape.
ਨੌਜਵਾਨ ਜੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਇੱਥੇ ਦੇਖੀ ਯੂਕੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਾਂ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਦੇਖ ਲਓ ਹੁਣ ਆਪਾਂ ਇੰਡੀਆ 'ਚ ਪਹਿਲਾ ਕੈਂਪ ਕੀਤਾ ਸਾਡਾ ਸਿੱਖੀ ਕੈਂਪ ਪ੍ਰਚਾਰ ਕੀਤਾ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੇ ਹੁਣ ਪਿਛਲੇ ਸਾਲ ਮੈਂ 3 ਵਾਰੀ ਗਿਆ ਸੀਗਾ ਇਹ ਸਾਡਾ ਪਹਿਲਾ ਕੈਂਪ ਸੀ ਉੱਥੇ ਵੀ ਸੇਮ ਤਕਲੀਫਾਂ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ ਉੱਥੇ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਬੋਲਦੇ ਆਰਾਮ ਨਾਲ ਉੱਥੇ ਵੀ ਸੇਮ ਤਕਲੀਫ ਹੈਗੀ ਨੌਜਵਾਨ ਸੋਚਦੇ ਨੇ ਕਿ ਵੀ ਆਪਾਂ ਸਾਡੇ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰਾ ਨਾਲ ਕੁਝ ਬਣਨਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰੇ ਨਾ ਕਮੇਟੀ ਸ਼ਾਮਲ ਹੋਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਨਾ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਕੋਈ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਬਜ਼ੁਰਗ ਹੈਗੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕੋਈ ਲਿੰਕ ਹੈਗਾ ਆ so what we're dealing with is the same thing.
Is this a post-religious society?
Well, no, not really. I think it's come down to a system which is not ours, very alien, which is this elections. Committees and elections are completely alien to our history. Very similar to what Shamshed is talking about, but we haven't seized upon the jar of the root of the problem. We shouldn't have committees.
Well, Shamshed is saying something much more...
No, but I'm just saying, but he's taking the analysis on an intellectual level. I'm talking about when you talk about institutions and alienation, you've got to look at where that stems from. That stems from a situation whereby people are able to get into power without having any qualification in Sikhi. Because there's no grade of someone to be in a committee. You know, Jaz was just saying, there's no qualification. ਜਿਹਨੂੰ ਨਹੀਂ ਪਤਾ ਸਿੱਖੀ ਬਾਰੇ ਨਾ ਬਾਣੀ ਆਂਦੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ ਨਾ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇਤਿਹਾਸ ਪਤਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਅਸੀਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਮੋਰੇ ਖੜ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਖੜ ਜਾਓ ਜਿਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਹੈ ਜਿਵੇਂ ਸਾਡੇ ਗ੍ਰੰਥੀ ਹੈਗੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਅਸੀਂ ਕੋਈ ਦਰਜਾ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸੋ ਮੈਂ ਤਾਂ
validation, we need a validation system, ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਆਪਾਂ
absolutely every gurdwara should not have, firstly there should be no voting, that's my view, and secondly if you are in the committee then you should have a certain qualification in terms of skill sets in Sikhi, not academic qualification, but ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਇੰਨਾ ਕੁ ਇਤਿਹਾਸ ਪੜ੍ਹਾ ਹੋਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਹੈ. You have to have so much Bani at least memorized or be able to fluent in Bani. All the Sikh qualifications, you should be a role model in Sikhi before you step into a leadership position in a Gurdwara of Sikhi, which makes perfect sense to anybody else outside. But somehow in our community we don't get that. So hum pa gare se katha karan waste South Shields. ਸਾਊਥ ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਸਿੰਘ ਆਏ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਦੇਖੋ ਸਾਡੇ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਨਾ ਅੱਧੀ ਕਮੇਟੀ ਰਾਧਾ ਸਵਾਮੀ ਹੈ
ਅੱਛਾ
ਹੁਣ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇਹਦਾ ਕੀ ਕਰੋਗੇ ਹਾਊ ਕੈਨ ਦੈਟ ਯੂਥ ਫੀਲ ਕਨੈਕਟਡ ਟੂ ਗੁਰੂ ਗ੍ਰੰਥ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਜੀ ਦਾ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰਾ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਅੱਧੀ ਕਮੇਟੀ ਕਹਿੰਦੀ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਬੋਲ ਸਕਦੇ ਦੇਹਧਾਰੀ ਗੁਰੂ ਦੇ ਖਿਲਾਫ ਆਪਾਂ ਤਾਂ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਠੀਕ ਨਹੀਂ ਸਿੱਖੀ ਦੇ ਮੁਤਾਬਿਕ ਪਰ ਉੱਥੇ ਕਰ ਨਹੀਂ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਗੱਲ ਸੋ ਆਬਵੀਅਸਲੀ ਦੇ ਗੋਇੰ ਟੂ ਫੀਲ ਲਾਈਕ ਇਜ਼ ਮਾਈ ਗੁਰੂ ਗ੍ਰੰਥ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਜੀ ਮਾਈ ਗੁਰੂ ਬਿਕਾਜ਼ ਉੱਥੇ ਗੱਲ ਹੋ ਨਹੀਂ ਰਹੀ ਇਸ ਚੀਜ਼ ਬਾਰੇ So we have to look at the jud. The jud is
So where are we
that
going
we've
wrong?
taken on a system
Yeah,
which is not ours. The system is not ours. Voting is not part of Sikhi. Yeah. ਕਿਧਰੇ ਵੀ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰੇ ਇਹ ਗੱਲ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਿ ਸੰਗਤ ਨੂੰ ਹੱਕ ਹੈਗਾ
We've got 50 seconds to break. So if do you want a
I think
quick
one point
yeah.
is you got to what do you go to the Gurdwara for? As an individual, as a youngster, let's say we're talking about them specifically, what do they get from the Gurdwara? And I'll take my own example. If I'm living in this country, understand the historical link, but we are here. We've been here for 40 odd years now. It's our responsibility to change and go back to our original roots. But you're not getting these messages. I mean, whether we say spiritually, politically, the stages are powerful in our Gurdwara. How much messages are they giving to the Najwan that are relevant to them, whether they're struggling with issues in a day-to-day basis?
How many of
The
us are
star
involved in
issues.
Gurdwaras?
I mean, we've just seen this.
We're not.
Just this last
not
month.
involved in the Gurdwara.
We've seen 2 incidents of the star being restricted at airports. I mean,
We're just going for a short break and we'll be straight back after this short break.
My name is Manjeet Kaur.
And my name is Gurnam Singh. Welcome to the One Show.
Sometimes in our culture, that say marriage or rape, sometimes people don't see that as abuse.
ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਜਦੋਂ ਮੈਂ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰੇ ਦੀਆਂ ਚਾਰ ਕੰਧਾਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਅੰਦਰ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਸਿੱਖੀ ਭਾਵਨਾ ਉਹ ਸਿੱਖੀ ਐਕਟਿਵਿਜ਼ਮ ਉਹ ਸਿੱਖੀ ਸੇਵਾ ਉਹ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਦਿਸ ਨਹੀਂ ਰਹੀਆਂ
When I go into that darbar and there's the Guruji and me, that there is a connection there that I'm trying to develop.
And when you go into Gurdwara, you learn Sikhi, right? And that, for me, even that will be tolerable.
Khalsa, Waheguru
Waheguru
Ji
Fateh.
Fateh. Welcome back to a very special One Show. Aj de show de vich we're really getting kind of deep today. We're going to the crux of the problem. And in the first half, Shamsher Singh Ji really posed a major challenge, which is almost everything that we think we are about has been tainted by either Western, European colonial ideas, or maybe even the Hindutva and the kind of, the kind of Brahminical systems. And so, it seems like, well, he's arguing we've got to really have a clean sweep. But then we've also got some questions about, what is it to be a Sikh? If it's an inclusive concept, then, do we need to be, have a wide spectrum? But we began to talk about the Gurdwaras. We're not going to really focus on that today because I think that's been rehearsed. But Jazz, just before the break, yeah? I mean, you've been heavily involved in trying to develop new institutions, new organisational structures. We had the Sikh Manifesto, and you've had some success. I mean, is that the way to go now? We need to, in a sense, build outside of the Gurdwaras.
I don't think it's about creating new ones. I think we need to strengthen the ones we have and actually refocus the ones we have. If we always reinvent the wheel, then we're really never going to make progress. And what we try to do when we looked at the Sikh network and the manifesto was look across the landscape of all of our organisations and look where the gaps were. And the gaps really, I mean, we did a huge amount of things as a Qawm, as a minority community, globally recognised, but there was a disconnect between working together. So what we try to focus on...
We're very inefficient as well, aren't we?
We get very focused on what we're doing and kind of forget everything else outside that sphere. And then what you end up doing is you get such a focused mindset and a track, then you get just obsessed with that element of it. And then to try and deviate or bring anything back out to the wider Sabadapala perspective, we kind of think, no, somebody doesn't know better than I. So we're trying to get defensive. And that's what I saw is, look, you see really progressive organizations and institutes, when you try and sort of take that to the next level, people get defensive and think, no, someone's trying to take it
So
in a
what
different
action
way.
should we take?
So I think we need to really evolve from where we are. We've come a huge way. If we just think the last 30 years in terms of what that did to us as a Qawm, historically, it's really where we've been dominant in the Gurdwaras and our organisations and in the UK as Sikhs here. We now need to stop looking backwards and trying to pick faults and pick issues. We are where we are because of the focus and the agenda back then. Where we are now, we're at a crossroads effectively, is that our generation, we need to be setting the strategy for the next 5 years, the next 10 years, the next 20 years. And as Shamsher said, yes, there is this historical past, whether it's colonialism, whether it's the Hindutva agenda or the Gandhi dynasty impact on Sikhi. Point is, the decision is ours now, which way we take it. And we talk about alienating the youth. I think there is a lot of sense and feeling in the Najwan of current issues within the Sikh Panth. It's galvanizing that and tapping into it is the problem. It's how do we become relevant, whether there are existing institutes, whether they're new ones, how do we tap into that passion and actually turn that into something practical, and whether that is connecting back with Sikhi in its truest form, or whether that is actually standing and being much more louder and prouder about our Sikhi and taking on these big campaigns, because I think we can be successful.
Shamsher Singh, I'm going to put, in taking your own kind of thesis, and applying that to a concrete problem. Jagraj touched on it earlier on. Do we believe in a democratic system? Do we believe in totalitarianism? Do we believe in dictatorship? What is our own, if we decolonize the kind of our political thought and go back to some kind of origin, what is it? Is it consensus building? What's the kind of political decision-making process that we could evolve that are different to the kind of maybe the defunct methods that Jagraj's been talking about?
I think part of the problem is that we're always trying to use labels from a European-centric worldview to try to understand something from South Asia.
Well, you're still offering a critique there. I'm asking you now to move beyond the critique.
Well, moving beyond the critique means adopting our language and our perspective and what I term an explicitly Sikh narrative. So that means when we're talking about consensus building, what we should be talking about is the Sikh Qawm, Azadi. We should be talking about, we understand when we have this conversation in Punjabi, कि ਅਸੀਂ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਚ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਕਿ ਸਾਡੀ ਕੌਮ ਆ, ਸਾਡਾ ਪੰਥ ਆ, ਪਿੱਛੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ੁਲਮ ਹੋਏ, ਗਾਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਆਜ਼ਾਦੀ ਤੋਂ ਬਿਨਾ ਸਾਡਾ ਭਵਿੱਖ ਸਵਾਰ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋਣਾ. That when we talk in our language, we understand what those things are concretely, because it carries with it the memory of generations of Sikhi, and it carries with it the memory of the generations of pain and struggle for Azadi. And we know from Gurbani and we know from our Itihas what our system is. And it's in Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji, Ardas Karde Maharaj de More, and we ask for guidance and we ask for Gurmat. And how do we explain Gurmat in terms of consensus building? How do we cannot explain these things, because what ends up happening is we mistranslate them and we add mysticism because of Saeed's theory of Orientalism. We make it like we push it so far away and we translate everything. We're caught up in this, that we need the solution now. We need answers now because it affects us so deeply. And I think we need to really slow down and really connect not just with our history but the history of the colonized people of the world, the global south, and broaden this dialogue. And I know we're going to talk later on about JNU, and you talked about it earlier. Where is the Sikh voice in that? Where is the Sikh voice when it comes to Kashmir, when it comes to Palestine? We cite Israel as an example of a successful community and a successful state. We cite Britishness and British values.
Well, let's take yours. Upinderjit, I'll come to you because, in a sense, again, we're back into this kind of Edward Said and kind of post-colonial. We need to embrace other post-colonial peoples, maybe indigenous people, maybe people who have been oppressed, the black people in America. The Dalits,
they're all our allies and they're facing the
Is that the way
struggles
forward then, is to try to, as it were, separate ourselves from the kind of imperialist forces? Or is that just a kind of romantic kind of undergraduate kind of fantasizing?
Well, to a certain degree, this whole colonial stamp
that's been put on how we talk about our faith, something that you've alluded to already. You know, using kind of the language.
Just put the mic on, it's come off, yeah. Sorry.
It's at the moment what's happening is that this stamp of how we talk about Sikhi, for example, you know, from those who first interpreted the Guru Granth Sahib, you know, we're still using terms like baptism. You know, when we're talking about initiation,
Yeah.
baptism is a Christian rite, but we're still
People
talking
like you
about
have been
it.
writing books on Sikh education, have been using those words. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, and now we need to be able to change the terminology that we're using, because the youngsters are getting confused. They're talking about baptism, they're talking about orthodoxy, etc., etc. And we do need to be confident enough in order to be able to develop our own resources now, by which we can have some kind of a toolkit, which then goes to the
Well,
Gurdwaras,
let me take another
youth
concept,
workers.
because this is a concept that you push a lot, and we all do. And I've seen it on your YouTube videos, equality. Sikhi believes in equality. What reference point are we using? Are we using a Western reference point, a legislative reference point? What is this equality that we believe in? Given that we've already said that maybe there's a kind of hierarchy of being a proper Sikh and not a Sikh, Amritdhari Sikh. So what is this equality?
No, I mean, the point we're trying to argue here is about, do we understand Sikhi from Gurbani's point of view?
Yeah.
So when what I say is that the youth are
Do
desperate.
we believe in equality?
Well, I mean,
Because all the
it's-
books that I've read say that's the first line you get. Sikhi believes in equality.
The thing with the equality thing has gone too far, is that people have started to say that all religions are equal, where we end up getting in a problem, because Gurbani is saying Sabte Vadda Sat Guru Nanak Jin Kal Rakhi Meri. So in India just now we had a discussion about what does that pankti mean, because we had a camp. That the hukmnama for the camp was that Shabad, Jiske se upar tu swami, so dukh kaisa paave. So we talked about that, and what Guru Granth Sahib Ji is telling us is that in every rag, before you get the Bhagats, you get Guru Nanak Dev Ji, then you get Guru Angad Dev Ji, then you get Guru Amar Das, and it goes through that, then you get the Bhagats afterwards. So never in a rag do you get Bhagat Kabir Ji put at the front. And even among the Bhagats, you get Bhagat Kabir Ji first, and then you get all the rest of the Bhagats. So Gurbani is giving a hierarchy within itself. So I think in the same way, when you look at, say, people, there is actually the fact that the Jyot inside is all the same, absolutely. But there is a hierarchy within Gurbani as well. Guru Sahib is straight away saying that menu Gursikh pyare ne. Jad ke Maharaj is saying that menu koi sakat milya, sakat sang na kijiye, dur hai jaiye bhag. So it's straight away telling you that tusi sang bhi na karo sakati. Gurbani is telling you ki
So help me to understand this
bhagatan te
concept of
sansariya
equality, because
jod
I
kade na
believe
aya.
that I've just taken a very simplistic view of equality then.
Well, Gurbani is giving you the idea that the person jo har ka pyara, so sabna ka pyara. So for us, the principle is those that love Waheguru and those that are beloved to Waheguru, of the type that Guru Sahib is talking about, then they are the highest, right? They're the highest. And then from there is a gradation. So really for us, that's why I believe that you can't have equality of voting, because when you say to somebody you're equal to everybody else, and that person feels that I have the same right to have a say in the Gurdwara as anybody else, but that is opposite to what Gurbani is saying. Gurbani is saying that actually Guni Gyani, people should sit together and decide. People that have got the right qualities and the right Gyan should sit and decide how things are run. So our Gurdwara it's the political system and the spiritual system is all interrelated, you know.
Let me go back to you.
I just wanted to ask Shamsher, when Apindaji, when you pointed out that Apindaji has wrote some Sikhiya book, and you sort of grinned, and I just want to know, why was that?
It comes down to the interpreters of Sikh thought, and it comes down to our understanding of Sikhi. Let me put it like this.
Put the mic on. Get the mic on. Just keep it on, yeah.
It is on. It's on.
Yeah, okay, keep it on, yeah.
I think, let me put it like this, right? The future
Future of Sikhi in the West, is it only modern and liberal if it exists in English? Because if that's the case, where we're heading is kind of it's very tenuous, that path that we're taking, and it's very dangerous because it's leading us away from what the West then terms puritanicalism, orthodoxy. It terms it as extremism when it doesn't like it, fundamentalism. But to us, that's Gurmat, that's Gur-Ityas, that's our Siddhant, that's our Shahidiyan, that's our entire existence exists in this place. So when we analyze stuff from a Western academic framework, which is a colonial framework.
I mean, yeah, Apindajit has to write curriculum materials in religious,
I don't think Apindaji is saying that it has to be in English for it to be Gurmat.
But it's very difficult for a 6-year-old, 7-year-old to offer, Saeed as the kind of starting point. I mean, for them,
yeah.
children need those kind of tangible things. They can't get into those kind of nuanced arguments. So, how do you? I mean,
I'm talking about how the education is conveyed. I mean, that's for experts in that field to demonstrate. But the core of
so
the
you
arguments.
just want to be the kind of philosopher. You know, what was it? Marx said that philosophers explain the world, but the point is to change the world.
I think we need elements of both, ideally, and I think we're lacking in our community. And if we're talking about solutions, we need activism on a grassroots level that's going to rebuild. I agree with Jazz that we shouldn't be reinventing the wheel constantly, but at the same time, we shouldn't be afraid of demolishing the wheel and rebuilding it as we need.
So we've got to demolish. We've got to demolish your books. No, I mean, I'm metaphorically speaking, and we've got to start again.
This is that whole age-old conflict, isn't it, between academic and confessional approach to Sikhi. And in my opinion, the younger generation here in the UK are becoming alienated from Gurdwara because they're not allowed to really go down that critical road. And in school, we're in England, we're in Britain, we are educated according to the Western critical analysis framework. So the youngsters, when they're in the Gurdwara, they want to engage in dialogue, they want to question things, that they want to be able to question it rationally. And so when we're producing resources, for example, recently this has been produced by RE Today, and this looks at exactly that rational analysis approach to Sikhi. If we don't have this, more and more youngsters will be, unfortunately, turning away from Sikhi because they're not finding their answers and they're going to other sources of authority. For example, on the internet, how can we trust what's on the internet all of the time? At least with academic sources, they've gone through some kind of a peer review process. So, I really do think it's time that we stopped bashing, the whole academic approach to Sikhi.
Jazz, I mean, coming to you, I mean, this is a really important point. Take 5 Sikhs, scholars if you want, or Gyanis or Pracharaks. They have 5 different kind of positions, yeah? And to overcome or get through the chaos, I mean, the how Maryada was, we can't even decide what the Mool Mantra is, never mind anything else. Really, this is the only way. In today's cosmopolitan global world, we give our youngsters the critical insights, so that if we believe Sikhi has the truth, then we shouldn't be frightened to interrogate that.
Look, I take a very simple view. I'm not an academic and I'm not a pracharak. And if you take those at the level height of Sikhi academia and the pracharaks out the way, you've got a big middle ground. I'm somewhere in that middle ground. And to me, the real things that I find is how do individuals, everybody's on a journey. And I think sometimes a higher level of conversation can lose the people that we're trying to bring back into it. And I take a very simple view in that, but just around purely from the media aspect. And really, when you really get down to it, that says it all to us. We can't just sit in Port and just read Gurbani. We have to be relevant to the world. Whether we're living in Punjab, whether we're living in England or anywhere else in the globe, we have to be relevant to the world.
And in Guru Granth Sahib, Guru Nanak Dev Ji, there's the Babar Bani who says that Anda ko, Mughal Patani, Anda ko, Brahman said Ram Ram karo, and Guru Nanak said Osarya no mar. So Guru is invoking us to act, not just to critique.
No, and this way comes back to on the political side of it. Our whole struggle is political. It's Rajniti. Raj banana dharm chale, dharm banana sab dale maleha. So we I've heard it so many times, we don't want to have that. We don't want to get political. That's actually turning us totally away from where the solution is. Now, I've always believed in whatever you want to do. So if you are educating or raising awareness in this country about our dharma or our issues, whether you're protesting, whether you're liberating and you're starting a revolution, whatever action you are, the ultimate point is going to be a political solution in any way, shape or form. Whatever your needs are, your demands are, you will resolve them through any journey politically. And that's Rajniti. And this is where I think from a Sikhi perspective, we also need to engage with that generation, because these are important factors. And if we start staying away from these things, because of, I think, to talk about the alienation, politics generally is being alienated. Other things will be...
The world throughout.
I mean, we're in a materialistic
Donald Trump
view.
Is now appealing to the same mindset.
Exactly. You've got celebrity lifestyles, they're the popular. You've got Donald Trump leading the Republican
They're all
primaries.
anti-politicians now.
And so this is a global issue, and this is where Sikhi then becomes poor, because it brings you back to the simple things and the important things. And I think if we focus on that and allow individuals to recognize where are they in that journey, and go away from this all or nothing approach. Because I've seen it too far, that if you don't tick every single box, then you're not relevant. And I think what we've got to be open to say, look, no matter where you are, everyone's on a journey, but find what are you passionate about. As long as it's not diverting from Sikhi, then you bring them in and they've got to be able to express their opinion and view.
Okay, young people get involved in politics.
I'm sorry, can I just come in on the points that that were just raised here? You know, the collection of Bani that we refer to as Babar Bani is a critique of society at the time, and it is Guru Nanak presenting his ideas of how society was deviated at that time. And you know, we say, you know, one of my teachers says that Sikh ajkal sochna nu kam nahi mande, right? We don't accept philosophy or academia, and I agree completely with what Dr. Apinderjit is saying. But the academics and the methodology and the frameworks should reflect our native experience, and the problem is Western academic doesn't reflect that at all, and the framework that's being used is a colonial framework. I mean, I'm saying we need critical thinking, and we need academia, and we need to be we need to act, but that acting, the acting that Guru Nanak is talking about in Babar Bani is Damag de.
No, you are right there. I mean, there are not just Sikhs. I mean, you know, there are feminists who also say that, you know, traditional Western white male academia is broken. There are even white male academics are saying it's broken. So I think there is a crisis of thinking. I think you are right there. But you were coming in, yeah.
Jazz been talking about going to the common person. Sorry to say, but the common person is so separate from Sikhi at the moment. Like, let's look at my generation. There are people that are third generation here. Their parents came here when their parents were young. Then their kids now. My generation is having kids, and their kids are in, like, sometimes in their teenage years, yeah. And those people are like saying things like, they'll say things like, my parents used to be Sikhs. My parents
in the past
because they're going through.
They'll say, I'm from a Sikh family, but they won't say
they
I'm
become the other to the Sikh.
Right, for them.
But they're going through crisis themselves.
Say Bili, all to them all day long. They don't understand why they are a Sikh. Because all they've been told to do is come to a Gurdwara, Matha Tek, have Prashad, pay a langar, go home. They don't even know what langar is. They don't even know what it's meant to be doing for them. And about compassion, Mara says, we're not even teaching.
They've never had a dialogue with the parents and never.
Mara is saying, coming back to understanding what Daya is, how do you explain to me what langar is? It's not just free food. If you look at India, he was in the langar, giving out langar in Delhi at Nagar Kirtan. They spent 30 crore in one day in Delhi giving away langar. So here's what happened. One Hindu guy is there, and he says to his Hindu friend, in front of a Sardar who heard this, he goes, Sikh to pagal ho gaye ne, khana vande ne, chuklo. Because they don't know what langar is. Nor do we explain to anybody what langar is. So what's happened is that we have now gotten into a point where it's almost unrecognizable from what Sikhi used to be.
You know, I was thinking,
going back to the common person.
Just on the langar, if I could, because I was thinking about langar today, actually. Because I mean, I've been reading a book by Paul Mason called Post-Capitalism. It's a very interesting book. And I was thinking that in some senses, langar is a post-capitalist construct because it's the exchange of goods without money exchanging. It's a kind of almost a kind of commune. It's a communal thing. It's where we. And in fact, if you offer somebody money in a langar, that's the biggest insult that you could do. You know, isn't it? That's the biggest insult. So I think that maybe that's another thing that we need to say that what we've got, in a sense, is beyond. It's the solution to the problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's another way we've got
to. Seizing upon langar as a massive solution to the world's problems.
Yeah.
But actually it is, and Guru Sahib has given us, because Guru Sahib is saying, Deg, Jaga mein dahu chale. All over the world there should be Deg and Deg. So what the common Sikh wants to know now, I believe, is my perspective of how they want to know that what they've been given by their Guru is really amazing. They want to believe that, because they've lost hope, they don't know why they're sick. So I think we have to go back to Sikhi and explain it to the common person, say, you know what, Sikhi sabto uchi, sabto suchi. It's the greatest and the most pure thing there is upon earth. And this is the
So go to basic and build their confidence,
is actually the most amazing gyan upon earth. If you can fill that into a young Naujawan Sikh today, make them not just fill it into their head by brainwashing, but actually give them examples about, for example, you said langar. For example, when we say kirpan given to a woman, we're talking about equality, when people say, oh, you're Sikhs, you haven't got equality, ਪਹਿਲੀ ਗੱਲ ਉਹ ਕਰੋ ਕਿ ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਔਰਤ ਨੂੰ ਕਿਰਪਾਨੀ ਫੜਾਤੀ,
women's empowerment.
yeah, the most
give her
important
the
thing
power.
you can do is to give
But that's a
somebody shelter.
metaphor as well for broad issues like women's empowerment.
ਜਿਵੇਂ ਹੁਣ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਹ ਗੱਲ ਆਪਾਂ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਿ ਔਰਤ ਨੂੰ ਮਹਾਰਾਜ ਨੇ ਇੱਕ ਦਰਜਾ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕੌਰ ਹੋ. You are a ਕੌਰ when you're born, you're a ਕੌਰ when you're married, you're a ਕੌਰ when you die. You don't change from being a kor. You don't become somebody's property. You know your dad's property when you're born. Then you know your husband's property after you get married.
So, because I've always grown up thinking kor is a princess. Is there a different etymology to the word kor?
There's many different translations of the word kor. Firstly, the kor doesn't actually mean princess, firstly, because Akali Kaur Singh was a famous warrior. His parents didn't call him princess. That's basically, isn't it? Calling your son
So what does it mean then?
So the word kor can take two meanings. Firstly, I would say, the one meaning, it comes from the word Kanwar, as in a prince. So the word kor used to mean a royal surname.
Royal. Sovereign.
So it was supposed to be the next person in charge of the throne. So Mara is saying kor. Now the second word of the word, the meaning of the word kor comes from the word kwari. Kwari used to mean pure. So when a woman was kwari, she was unmarried, right? So at this point, our Guru Sahib is saying a woman is a pure when she's not married and after she's married. She remains pure. Or the darza dekho Gurbani bahut ucha hai. Guru Sahib always is telling men, don't look at another woman. But you never really see a Shabad telling a woman, don't look at another man. Because aurat hai hi changi. From the beginning, Mara is saying that they already achar change ne. They've got the right thinking that they are wafadar. So Guru Sahib is actually telling us to be like a woman towards Waheguru. But these kinds of philosophies aren't really coming up. We keep saying we're equal.
Is this the kind of decolonization that you're talking about? Is this the kind of exegesis? I mean, is that the kind of critical analysis that you're talking about? Or do we need to go even further?
I think we need to go a lot further than that. I think it's a good starting point, but I think the conversation that we need to have, like I know you were talking about the common man, but you know, it's a saying that what academics talk about affects society in 5-10 years time. I think that's the point that we're at now. We have a crisis of thinking within our Panth, and we're not addressing that at all. And the way we're trying to address that is through the framework of Western academia, which is actually perpetuating the problems it's trying to address. And we don't have that level of critical thinking within the Panth. And what we end up doing with translation, with giving platitudes, is we end up losing so much in the process. We go from mistranslation to mystification, and we lose so much. We lose the real experience of Sikhi, because what ends up happening is we translate the experience of Sikhi from Punjab into English today, and what happens is the Punjabi that we're using from Punjab comes with a cultural context. Beyond the meaning, there's a cultural context to it, there's an emotion tied to it, there's a history, the hadbita ityas of the people there. And what we end up doing it is making it very black and white, and we're making it into quotations and analogies, and we're simplifying it to suit us. So we'll pick from this palette when it suits us to make a certain point, then we'll pick from this palette. I mean, the same argument that we make with the one Jagraj is making, there's a section within that community that will make the complete opposite argument and cite Chitrapakyan as evidence of. So we pick from that palette, and it's very dangerous because we're losing so much in the process, because the level of critical thinking required isn't present, to be honest. And it's very dangerous. And I know you were saying it's almost nihilistic, almost in a certain way, but we have to go to that point, because as Fanon says, decolonization is a process of putting the last first and the first last. And Guru Nanak says, we know from our Ityas and Sakya,
in Wretched of the Earth, Fanon also said that we shouldn't repeat the mistakes of the colonizer, and that the project is to build a universal humanity. And we will come back to the question. We're going to go for a break and maybe link that to our liberation struggle as well. So there is a crisis of thinking. We need new ideas, we need new politics, we need new organisation. It feels like we've got a big task. But after the break, we're going to solve all those problems in the next 15 minutes. So short break, and we'll be straight back. And we will open the calls as well. So if you're wanting to offer your thoughts on some of the issues that have been raised. So, ek choti ji break wal jane Manjit.
We'll see you straight after the break.
Hounga ji.
My name is Manjeet Kaur.
And my name is Gurnaam Singh. Welcome to the One Show.
Sometimes in our culture, that say marriage or rape, sometimes people don't see that as abuse.
ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਜਦੋਂ ਮੈਂ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰੇ ਦੀਆਂ ਚਾਰ ਕੰਧਾਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਅੰਦਰ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਸਿੱਖੀ ਭਾਵਨਾ, ਉਹ ਸਿੱਖੀ ਐਕਟਿਵਿਜ਼ਮ, ਉਹ ਸਿੱਖੀ ਸੇਵਾ, ਉਹ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਦਿਸ ਨਹੀਂ ਰਹੀਆਂ।
When I go into that darbar and there's the Guruji and me, that there is a connection there that I'm trying to develop.
And when you go into Gurdwara, you learn Sikhi, right? And that, for me, even that will be tolerable.
Crisis
of thinking. We've been talking about the challenges facing Sikh youth in this country, the Sikh community, but also globally. And you know, if we're talking about a crisis, Manjit, not only is there a crisis of thinking, in India there's a much deeper crisis, the crisis of survival of the Sikh people, or even if you could say the Punjabi people. And you know, there is earlier we talked about, Shamsher talked about liberation. So there's liberating the mind, there's liberating the body, and then there's liberating the nation. So let's focus on that now. Apinderjit, if we talk to a lot of active young Sikhs in this country, then the word Khalistan or the idea of Khalistan will enter the conversation sooner or later. The question for me is, with 30 odd years from 1984. Does Khalistan just represent some kind of utopian space, a refuge, a place where they can feel some solace? Or is it a political project? Is it a kind of planned project? Where would you kind of understand?
I would say from the conversations that I've been having with youngsters, it's a bit of both really. For a number of youngsters that I've spoken to, the idea of Khalistan is indeed utopian. It's an imagined state where everybody is equal, etc. However, for a number of other youngsters, it is very much a real. It is very much a real state, in the sense that, for example, images of Sant Bhindranwale are becoming very, very popular.
So it's feeding the kind of imagined entity.
And those images are actually symbolic of the fact that there has not been any justice for the events in 1984 to this day. So increasingly, a lot of youngsters are getting involved in these kinds of dialogues. And again, it depends on their peer and kin network groups as well. It depends on where they're going. It depends on where these conversations are being had and who's actually leading these conversations. There is some research that needs to be done on this, and currently we are doing this at the University of Wolverhampton. So we're trying to analyse, all these different perceptions. But again, we need to be careful of the sample that we have. The sample is very important. It can't be fraught in the sense that there's a selected number of individuals.
Let me put that point to Jaz. Jaz, our movement, our struggle, are we turning in on ourselves? Are we looking for a solution within, when in fact, if it's a political project, the solution has got to be out there in the field, on the ground? And there are real ruptures taking place in that society at the moment. We've seen the JNU protests.
And again, I said before, I think our struggle has always been political, not only from 1984, but actually all the way from 1849, from the Sikh kingdom being annexed by the British. And ever since then, we always then yearned back for our own religious freedom and sovereignty, if you like. I think when you then look at 1947, and it's going to be the 70th year anniversary soon, and actually the struggle was the same. It was actually a Sikh kingdom. It was a Sikh homeland we were talking about. The trap that we fell into was actually an internal self-determination, that actually Sikhs would be free within a larger state called India. And into that, that's when we then got lost. And ever since then, we've kind of forgotten actually our sovereignty and our integrity was actually core from way back from Guru Nanak, and we've lost that.
But
And
the Sikh kingdom that you talk about was essentially a secular, okay, you know, the Maharaja, but it wasn't a theocratic state.
No.
But some of these utopian ideas of Khalistan seem to be pointing towards some kind of theocratic, religious kind of entity as opposed to a democratic or free, liberated space.
Yeah, I think when you have the conversation, I think it stems from the level of oppression, the level of discrimination, and lack of religious freedom and your freedom of speech. So all of these are human rights. These are basic human rights that are afforded to everybody in the world. And Sikhi has always defended human rights. It's been the cornerstone of humanity. And once those rights are oppressed, then ultimately people will. And Dharam is one to stand actually for that. I mean, at the end of the day, any oppression, Sikhi teach you to stand.
All that rhetoric is there. The question is the political project.
So
I mean,
yeah, for me,
the rhetoric.
For me, it's always
I give you the rhetoric week in, week out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So for me, this is absolutely a political project, if you like. This is something that we have to identify ourselves.
We build alliances.
Alliances, but we need to understand what we want ourselves in totality, and that people need to understand that.
Built alliances. They built them with with the different people.
The alliances. What we're talking about, if we're talking about a state and a homeland, then ultimately that is going to be a conversation. Yeah. We can't just declare that ourselves. Ultimately, we're in. If you take about Punjab as a state, all these conversations need to be had, and I think what we've struggled with actually the suppression of that conversation and that dialogue. And that has actually crippled the quality of points of view and understanding in the wider, either Naujawan, elders, academics, because they've all shied away from having the conversation.
Let me put this question to Shamsher. When you're talking about Sikh freedom or liberation, are you talking about a utopian space or a real place, a real political project?
A real political project, and I think some of the confusion arises because the idea of utopia comes from Gurbani itself. When we talk about Hale Miraj, the Shabads written by Maharaj, and they talk about Sab Sukhali Vuttiyan, this idea of utopia is from Gurbani.
Well, there's dispute.
This idea.
Some people say that the Bhagavad Gita, when he talked about Begumpura, he was talking about a real state, a real place where you could have liberated peoples and not some heavenly kind of abode.
But this idea of utopia comes from Gurbani. So the highest ideal of human existence we get from Gurbani is, as you say in Punjabi, Asi Set Guru to Lenya. And that is given a physical manifestation by Guru Nanak when he establishes Kartarpur. The subsequent Gurus, when they establish Taran Taran, Goindwal, Amritsar, they carry on building and giving a physical representation.
Itself as a constitution for that space, maybe.
Giving an idea of self-governance and azadi to people that had been oppressed in South Asia for thousands of years. So it's a both, and
so
we know with Miri Piri.
Space for Sikhs? Or is it for everybody?
This is our Dharam, essentially, right? So, Bhai Nand Lal writes, Khalsa Soe Malesh Se Chare. So it's not only for us to live in freedom and harmony, but also to export that revolution to other places and free people that are oppressed, like Jazz is talking about human rights, and us, taking that revolution of Sikhi everywhere in the world and challenging oppression and challenging power.
With Kanhaiya and people like that, with the Dalit students who are now fighting the Hindutva?
100%. That's our position. That's always been our position within South Asia, within India. Our place has always been with the oppressed of society and those strata of society that have been oppressed by Brahmanism. That Brahmanical degree classifies as untouchable, as uneducated, as worthless. Our position and our alliance, we came from them. So we are them.
Let
because
me put that,
we're the same.
Is the next, as it were, stage in our struggle now being defined by events that are happening? I mean, Dal Khalsa put out a statement, powerful statement, in solidarity with the JNU students. And if you look at the Aam Aadmi Party, a lot which is now very active in Punjab and Delhi, a lot of their intellectuals also come out of JNU as well. Is this a moment now that we need to, as it were, form alliances and take our struggle, which is, it's anti-Brahminical struggle? Is that,
just building on that, I think we're kind of here at a danger taking it down the Aam Aadmi route, because it's essentially a nationalistic party. And as our Guru says, Baaz Hat Jod very mit na hove.
It's the enemy of my enemy, my friend. That's the important thing.
Unless we have power as well. We need that power.
Strategic alliances, and the Gurus.
We need our power.
Right. Jagraj Singh, is it time to now develop an activism that's, join those activists in Delhi and other places?
When we say the word we, let's be very clear, there is no we. We're totally unorganized, totally inefficient at making a decision. We can't even come together and decide anything for this country. So when people say the word we, I get drained of any.
That's very true.
I'm
yeah.
like, what is the we? Who is this we? We should do this, we should do that. So there is no we. We haven't got a single system in this country. Just ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਨੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਇਸ ਕੰਟਰੀ ਵਿੱਚ ਹਾਲੇ ਤੱਕ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਨਹੀਂ ਸਮਝ ਆਈ ਕਿ ਆਪਾਂ ਆਰਗੇਨਾਈਜ਼ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗੇ
ਏਕਤਾ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਇੱਥੇ
ਏਕਤਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗੀ ਨਾਲ ਕੋਈ ਸਿਸਟਮ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗੀ ਏਕਤਾ ਬਣਾਉਣ ਵਾਸਤੇ there's no leadership that is Panthic orientated. You know, I despair at the leadership now because they don't understand that we need to organize. Like I said to you earlier, 33 crore, which is 3.3 million pounds, I spent in one day in Delhi to give langar. We can't organize 3.3 million to then do prachar throughout the rest of the year. We have got no we. There's no one making decisions in our Panth. Let's be very clear. The Naujawan nowadays, if I talk to Noam Sikh nowadays, if I explain to him how the elder generation make decisions, they would think, I don't want to join that. We are completely unorganized.
So why are we divided in groups?
Well, it's not just the divisions in groups. There's no system to bring us together. If you look at, for example, the 3 or 4 main organizations in this country that she has spoken, we don't have a single Panthic Ikat. We never come together. Tell me one time in the last 30 years where we've come
So how
together.
can we get the Panth together?
Yeah,
go on then.
Have we ever in the last 30 years come together and decided upon a Panthic agenda that is chosen by the people in a Gurmat way? Have we ever decided, you know what, leaving everything aside, let's set up a Jathedar, let's have a Panth Pyari to guide him, let's set up something which is Panthic orientated.
I think there's parts of...
You know, Jazz talked about the idea about democracy, why we didn't take our Raj in before when the British left us, yeah? I'll give you one example of why at that time, you know, the people that were leading our Panth, who normally now we cuss big time, yeah? Why they didn't decide at that time to choose a Sikh Raj? Because, you know, the Sikh community would have been 20% of that kingdom. If you look at the Punjab of those days, it was so big.
We were always
the Sikhs would have been only 20%. But what was the system the British were going to leave us behind with? You know, the poison glass, glass to zehar pata, tinal vich pani pa ke parata. What's going to happen? You're going to die. So what happened is they gave us democracy. The system that was going to be imposed in the Sikh Raj was going to be democracy. We would have been a minority in our own country because we don't seem to have this concept inside us nowadays. You know what? We don't need democracy. We don't need to have a Sikh Raj run upon democratic lines. We could run it upon the castle lines.
But we need a Sikh Raj.
Of course we need a Sikh Raj.
Yeah, and that's fine. And the point, going back to 47, that was our decision. Once you've got your own country, it's your decision on what grounds and what constitution you write. But the point of and I disagree with the fact that we are not organised. And again, I take the view of you can look at anything in a negative light. And
it's a glass half full, glass half.
Yeah, and it comes down to what's your contribution as well. And if I take a look about it, just over the last 3-4 years, you talk about the UK. I think the UK is actually pretty well organised. I think there's a lot of limitations and we're at the crossroads, like I said earlier, in terms of the Panthic decision making in the UK. I think on the big issues, pretty much the Panth stands together. You're always going to have your individuals that will go around, cause trouble.
Do you think we are at a kind of defining moment now? There is a crossroads.
I think we are absolutely at a defining moment in terms of, if you think about where we are as a society and as a Panth in the UK, where we are established from nothing to where we are with Guru Maharaj Kirpa, that is all on organisation and all on structure and all on the ability to build, deliver,
but
and
also
educate.
to build some kind of political
but it's going forward,
rooted in
Sikhi.
So, you know, if we say at the moment that we're all organised, that's to ignore the realities of the ground, where one group is vying for power against another group, a third group is now coming up trying to.
But isn't that the history of our Panth?
That's just life.
That's the history of our Panth.
But we couldn't even sort out something as simple as the interfaith marriages. It's still a complete. You know, we're trying to. But the solution to that, for example, now we know as in India, we met with some of the people that are looking at Sarbat Khasa. So the reality is that over here, we did Jakari for Sarbat Khasa, brilliantly happened. 5 lakh Sikh pahunch ke hote. But gal je piche dekhoge, it was a completely unorganized system. When we say we, who is that we? This is the question I was asking you. Who is that we that decide anything? We at the moment, as a Sikh community, are very unorganized. If you don't recognize that part, that we'll never be able to organise ourselves, because you know what happens is
और फिर अगे तौर ही नहीं सकते अगे
and you say कि चलो आप उत्थे ठीक है जिथे आप हैगे
But we have
you
to
lose too much shabashi on yourself.
No, but I
You
mean,
don't
again,
realise
we're
you're so
getting
far away
negative.
from-
I
No,
mean,
no,
we have to-
take the non-college bit. And let's
I mean,
look
the
at that,
problem
right? Let's look
is
at
we
this is
organise
it.
and we won something.
so
but
this
that's not
is-
it.
these are
That
real
was a given
examples.
victory. The
No,
bomb
no, no,
was a
no.
given
I mean,
victory.
I disagree.
Nobody that
You
was
take the
ever
non-college
gonna
one.
be
This
able
was
to
a
into India.
Okay.
in wider society. This was deemed as a big controversial issue, and within months, the whole UK Panth managed to come together.
Okay.
Get all the Gurdwara, discuss an outcome,
Okay.
and now move the. So we are achieving in months and years what other faiths are struggling for decades. So from that point of view, I don't believe in timelines.
So
but
there are
let's
some
look at some
lights
successes.
that we're going to
Yeah.
go to a break, Chas. We'll come straight
Right,
back
okay.
up.
No, I don't want to point out. I'm not being negative here. I'm just saying that the solutions lie in the Guru system, which
So
we're not
we'll
implementing.
go to a break and then we'll come straight back for the last part of the programme.
My name's Manjeet Kaur.
My name is Gurnam Singh. Welcome to the One Show.
Sometimes in our culture, that say marital rape, sometimes people don't see that as abuse.
ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਜਦੋਂ ਮੈਂ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰੇ ਦੀਆਂ ਚਾਰ ਕੰਧਾਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਅੰਦਰ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਉਹ ਸਿੱਖੀ ਭਾਵਨਾ ਉਹ ਸਿੱਖੀ ਐਕਟਿਵਿਜ਼ਮ ਉਹ ਸਿੱਖੀ ਸੇਵਾ ਉਹ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਦਿਸ ਨਹੀਂ ਰਹੀਆਂ
When I go into that darbar and there's the Guruji and me, that there is a connection there that I'm trying to develop.
And when you go into Gurdwara, you learn Sikhi, right? And that, for me, even that will be tolerable.
वाहिगुरू जी का खालसा वाहिगुरू जी की फतेह.
Welcome back to the final part of our special One Show today, where we're continuing that theme from last week, is about the future of Sikhi. And in today's show, we've gone on quite a journey around decolonising the mind of the Sikh, as it were. Also around organising, we've been talking about the need for prachar, but a critical, maybe dialogical prachar, the traditions that the Gurus gave us. And we also need to develop confidence, Manjeet, and our own as well take on Sikh teachings and how we translate that into curriculum. And all these issues are there for us to tackle. Upinderjeet, we're just going to try and draw some of the issues together. I mean, can you see some threads with all these issues? I mean, or what kind of projects might come out of these a challenge that we face?
I think in terms of the challenges that we face, we need to involve the youth in the decision-making processes that occur in the Gurdwara. We also need positive role models in the Gurdwara. Say, for example, more women and more youngsters on
really
the
address the
management
women's
committees.
question today.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just a case of turning up to the Gurdwara on Sunday with family. It's all about what the youth are taking away with them. They are our future leaders. They are our future of the Sikh faith. But in terms of them being able to take something away with them, they do need to have those conversations with learned individuals. And I really do think that the Gurdwara can be those places in which those conversations can take place, but we do need individuals who are trained.
And one of the questions was, we started at the beginning in terms of what is a Sikh, and I don't know about your experience, but my experience is that when you talk to, say, Sikhs who are not I mean, the language, the Amritdhari, it's not that they have negativity towards that, they see it as a spiritual journey. So we have to have some tolerance for difference, don't we? That's really important.
Absolutely. This is what Sikhi is based on, is tolerance and actually standing up when others are being oppressed. But from personal experience, what I'm finding is that there is this degree of who's a proper Sikh
and who isn't.
and even this term orthodox Sikh, which is
There
absolutely
are,
absurd,
yeah.
you know, when we're looking at the teachings of Guru
Structured.
Nanak. You know, so in terms of what the Khalsa stands for, the turban itself stands for standing up for others' oppressions. You know, and it is a symbol that was instituted for that very purpose. It wasn't a symbol that was instituted to say
For
that
exclusivity.
one who wears a turban is better than one who doesn't. And unfortunately, the conversations I've had with youngsters, this is the issue. They do feel as if they're almost pushed to the sidelines because they're not good enough.
And is there any hope for the Gurdwaras, or are we following the Christian kind of trajectory?
Of course there's hope for the Gurdwara, you know, in the sense that we do need to take examples from what other faiths, how other faiths are addressing these challenges. For example, I've already mentioned the Alpha course. You know, this was initially it was initially made so that those who are converting to Christianity can have some kind of knowledge. However, others are taken, and even the mosques have all kind of come together and produced a toolkit. And that very toolkit is to promote youth engagement with the management
That's brilliant.
committees.
Jagraj Singh ji, you know, we've kind of slipped into negativity. Give us some 2 minutes of positivity.
Look, when we do prachar on the streets, you're talking to one person, but 2,000, 3,000, 10,000, 20,000 people might watch that.
On YouTube and things,
And that's the brilliant part of today's world, is we've got to realise that actually we've got all these tools available to us that we can use to fire one shot and it becomes into 20,000 shots. So we have to use that. So the street prachar that we do, having real conversation with people on the street, mostly...
Can you
what we
upscale
find-
that? Can you upscale that? Can we have that in every town in England?
Absolutely. All we need Najwan to get involved. We've already made most of the leaflets. We've done so many of the conversations. Anybody can step up and do it. We actually, on our channel, we've actually put lots of videos of other people doing it, not just me, because we want to encourage others to do it.
Like a trend.
So
create a
exactly,
trend.
and I'll give you a simple example. When I was in California, one of the things came up to me, and he said that in his local university in California, they did a bit of street prachar and they gave out the leaflets. And he said the Chinese guy took the leaflet, he walked away, and about an hour later he came back and said, "I want to be a Sikh." Now, on a personal level, when we get a message on Facebook, literally about every week, or maybe more than a week, we get a message from somebody saying, "I want to be a Sikh. How do I become a Sikh? Tell me what I need to do."
So you're going
Sikh-
beyond the Punjabi heartland, you're going beyond the
we have to take
Punjabi
Sikhi outside.
You have
because
to,
Maharaj
yeah.
never kept it to Punjabi themselves. Guru Granth Sahib Ji is not just in Punjabi. So we have to go and tell people what Sikhi is. And I think that when we do that, we have to tell them also about our political struggle and what's happening to us right now, because they want to understand the history of Sikhi. So Benji's talking about the Alpha course. We actually made a course, the Waheguru course, which was a direct look. We took that and we said, look, it's working for the Christians. We should have something that someone can sign up to. In Slough, right now, there's about 120 people attending every week, and most of those people are not Amritari. Most of those people
That's
are totally outside Sikhi. They might not even come to Gurdwara on Sunday, but they're coming to a course because they're being taught Sikhi.
We'll love to get the
Fantastic,
Akal channel cameras for that. But thanks, Jagraj Singh ji. 2 minutes, Shamsher Singh ji.
I think on a personal level, on an individual level, we can survive and prosper in this country, and there's no doubt that
We are successful.
We're if
professionally.
anything but adaptable. But ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸਾਡੇ ਕੌਮ ਦਾ ਉਜੜਿਆ ਹੋਇਆ ਭਵਿੱਖ ਆ ਉਹ ਸਿਰਫ ਤਾਂ ਸਿਰਫ ਖਾਲਿਸਤਾਨ ਦੀ ਪ੍ਰਾਪਤੀ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਹੱਲ ਹੋ ਸਕਦਾ. So we need to build this dialogue around national liberation, and we need to elevate the conversation that we're having and align ourselves
Can we
with
draw
other
non-Sikhs into that cause?
other oppressed communities of the global south, and we need to build alliances, and we need to build revolutionary accomplices, so going beyond alliances, and we really need to challenge the mindset that we have in this country that we can survive here as a Qawm. So for us, building this dialogue around national liberation is important, not only for us politically, but the survival of Sikhi itself, because without that Qawm, without that idea of Pant, Sikhi essentially will disintegrate very, very quickly. And on a positive note, I often think about Chardi Kala and what it means and how I can apply this concept to my life. And for me personally, one of the most inspiring aspects of it is that the powers of the world have tried to destroy a consciousness that is alive within me today.
and it's so invigorating to feel that I'm alive and I'm stronger because I can see what's happened to my people, and I'm here at this moment in time, and I'm so powerful because I'm the best version of this model of a Sikh individual.
Absolutely. और गुरबानी से जिसका साहिब डांडा होए तिसनु मार ना सके कोई.
Exactly.
Absolutely. 2 minutes just.
Yeah, and I think, again, coming back to where we are today, I think what's going on in India and wider India is actually giving a lot more credibility to the Sikh struggle, in that what we've been shouting
about fascism and the kind of
absolutely and that pressure, whether it was the rape cases in Delhi a few years ago, whether it's the Dalits and what have you, is actually now the world is waking up to see that India is.
Western politicians are beginning now to believe what we're saying.
And this is it. And if we look at that, we've been struggling against the powerhouse of India for 30 years. Against that propaganda, against that influence in this country, in this and British government, and we realised that with the documents that were released last year in their involvement in Operation Blue Star and anti-Sikh measures up until today. And a great example of that, too, that we're going to touch on, is Panjib Parmar Singh case, in that he was an individual from Birmingham that was arrested, detained,
the behest of David and Goliath victory,
the behest of the Indian government under the British noses. And ultimately, the political power and struggle against their own laws ultimately got his freedom. And the other one is lifting the ban on the International Sikh Youth Federation. Since 2001, a Sikh organisation was banned, which had no involvement in terrorism. 10 years after the armed struggle, you could say, ended in India and in Punjab, and directly the British government, under the influence of India and other forces. And for that struggle, for 15 years, we've now been vindicated, and the Home Secretary is the only example in history where the Home Secretary has lifted a ban on an organisation, and that is the International Sikh Federation. That actually vindicates all the struggles that we've been doing, because now we are not a terrorist organisation overnight. So suddenly we are the custodians of human rights and justice, and that's where we've got to look forward.
Last few seconds.
Yeah, I just want to say, don't judge a book by the cover. If you're a Gursikh or a Saitari, it's what the guns you got inside you, that's what matters.
Absolutely.
That's what I say.
I think, you know, for me, I think what everybody said is making a contribution. You know, we have to align ourselves with other oppressed groups. Our Dharam is born to fight against oppression. We have to address the women's question. We have to address the question of positive refugees. And the stars are lining up, and we have to be there now. If we miss it now, then we will lose a generation. So, ਅੱਜ ਦੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਜੇ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਸਾਡੇ ਵਿਚਾਰ ਚੰਗੇ ਲੱਗੇ ਤਾਂ ਜਰੂਰ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਫੀਡਬੈਕ ਦਿਓ.
Thank you for coming down as well. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I mean,
thank you very much.
I think, you know, we are making history all the time by bringing these debates to the public. So this is the beginning, and you know, we've only scratched the surface. We hope that you in your homes now are also discussing and debating these issues. And we will come back to these issues again. So thank you very much for watching. Itte Samathia, Fateh Bilal.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
बोले सोने हाल सत श्री अकाल.
My name is Manjeet Kaur.
And my name is Gurnam Singh. Welcome to the One Show.
Sometimes in our culture, that say marriage or rape, sometimes people don't see that as abuse.
ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਜਦੋਂ ਮੈਂ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰੇ ਦੀਆਂ ਚਾਰ ਕੰਧਾਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਅੰਦਰ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਉਹ ਸਿੱਖੀ ਭਾਵਨਾ, ਉਹ ਸਿੱਖੀ ਐਕਟਿਵਿਜ਼ਮ, ਉਹ ਸਿੱਖੀ ਸੇਵਾ, ਉਹ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਦਿਸ ਨਹੀਂ ਰਹੀਆਂ.
When I go into that darbar and there's the Guruji and me, that there is a connection there that I'm trying to develop.
And when you go into Gurdwara, you learn Sikhi, right? And that, for me, even that will be tolerable.
सत